What if everything you were taught about life was never meant to be literal? What if fear around certain symbols didn't arise because they promised too much, but because they revealed something too simple and too powerful to be ignored? Throughout history, some symbols were never about the afterlife. They were about the present moment. And nothing has ever unsettled humanity more than learning how to truly stay alive. Here's the part almost no one says out loud. People who know how to sustain their own emotional energy are hard to break. The Ankh was never about living forever. It was about not disappearing while alive. At some point in history, staying internally alive, feeling deeply, desiring honestly, remaining present, began to be seen as excess, danger, even arrogance. And when living becomes a threat, exhaustion becomes the most efficient form of control. Perhaps that is why the Ankh was reduced to ornament, decoration, or harmless mystery. Ankh, scarab, nazar, hamsa, pentagram, Ouroboros, triskelion, triketra, mj, elenir, avol, yin-yang, tree of life, flower of life. Different names, distant cultures, the same quiet attempt to empty symbols that once taught emotional autonomy. But today, the story begins with one of them, because long before all the others, the Ankh was already teaching something dangerously simple: how to remain alive after impact. The origin of the Ankh, how life was understood. There is something essential about the origin of the Ankh that rarely gets noticed. It was never a promise of eternity. It was an answer to fragility. In ancient Egypt, life was seen as cyclical, unstable, constantly flirting with chaos. The Ankh emerged not as an escape from death, but as a way of understanding how life continues despite it. Before it became a symbol, the Ankh was a rhythm. The river rising and retreating, the sun disappearing and returning, the body breathing again after strain. Life was not abstract. It was something that had to be fed, protected, and sustained day after day. The Ankh represented the invisible force that keeps life moving, even when everything else shifts. The Egyptians called this force Ka. Ka was not the soul as we imagine it today, but vital energy, the current that animates the body and makes existence possible. When gods are depicted holding the Ankh close to a ruler's nose, they are not blessing him symbolically. They are offering breath, permission, continuation. But life, to the Egyptians, was never just energy. There was also Ba, identity, presence, the part that feels, desires, and recognizes itself. Without Ba, Ka would be power, without direction. The Ankh symbolized the meeting point between these two forces, vitality and consciousness. The Ankh has integration. Ka, Ba, and Osi. When Ka and Ba moved in harmony, Osi emerged integration. Oki was not merely a state after death, as later interpretations suggested. It was an ideal of living well, remaining coherent, whole, and aligned while moving through the world. The Ankh represented this path not as a moment, but as a discipline. The symbol itself explains this with striking clarity. The loop at the top: breath, life, what cannot be seen. The vertical line to human path: birth, experience, error, learning. The horizontal bar: balance, the meeting of opposing forces. Nothing is decorative. Every line maps how life holds together when it does not fracture from within. That is why the Ankh appeared in both birth rituals and funerary rites. There was no contradiction. Life and death belonged to the same flow. The Ankh did not deny the end. It taught how to cross it without losing essence. Life was never about endless duration. It was about continuity of meaning. In practice, this meant presence, feeling pain without emptying out, falling without disappearing, continuing without becoming numb. The Ankh never promised the absence of suffering. It taught something far more demanding: how not to break apart because of it. The distortion of the Ankh, from life to ornament. Over time, the Ankh lost its weight. What once symbolized sustained vitality was turned into decoration, mysticism, something safe and distant. This pattern is familiar. Whenever a symbol teaches autonomy, It must be so. Psychologically, the distortion followed a simple path. Instead of teaching how to sustain inner life, people were taught to endure. Instead of presence, resignation. Instead of vitality, obedience. Survival was praised. Living became suspicious. In everyday life, this distortion still echoes. People grow used to exhaustion and call it normal. Desire is postponed. Feeling is restrained. Surviving becomes virtue. The Ankh, at this stage, stops being the key of life and becomes an uncomfortable reminder of what was lost. And when symbols that speak of life are silenced, collective fatigue stops being questioned. If something in this story unsettled you, don't rush to explain it away. Discomfort is rarely a threat. More often, it is recognition. Some ideas don't disturb because they are false. They disturb because they are familiar. Because they touch something that was never destroyed, only neglected. The Ankh was never meant to convince you of anything. It was meant to remind you of what it feels like to remain alive on the inside. Notice what stayed with you. The images, the pauses, the silence between the words. That lingering feeling is not coincidence. It is what happens when an old symbol brushes against a part of you that still remembers how to endure without disappearing. And this story doesn't end here, because life doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in cycles. What sustains life is only one part of the path. What comes next is learning how to return without repeating the same fragmentation. If the Ankh taught how to remain alive after impact, the next symbol confronts something even more unsettling. The cycle that never breaks, only transforms. Stay with that thought. Let it work on you quietly. Some things don't need answers yet. They need space.